This is lesson 11.5, using data to predict outcomes, the parent help video for grade 3 everyday math. So this is a review lesson for some of the things we've already worked on, and it's introducing some concepts in a little bit different ways to kids than what they've seen before. So we want them to be able to record survey results in a frequency table. So we've talked about frequency tables before, and there is a separate video on that. And the frequency table basically says how often something happens. Okay, that's a frequency table. We want them to be able to draw conclusions from the results of a survey from the data. We want them to look at a set of data and then think about what the data actually means. Okay, so if they see there are, the everyday math example was how many right-handed and how many left-handed people. Okay, so they could look at a survey data and maybe 20 kids are right-handed and 3 kids are left-handed. They could draw the conclusion from that well, most kids are right-handed, right? Or most people are right-handed. They could draw that conclusion from that set of data. And this is just a basic introduction to using data. So the conclusions that they draw might not be 100% accurate, but we want them thinking about that. In reading, we would actually call that skill inferring, right? Inferring based, it's like making a guess. In reading, we call it inferring. They're guessing based on something that's not actually said in the book. So in math, when they look at a set of data, right, how many left hands and how many right hands, and they see 3 left hands and 20 right hands. This says in this one sample that most kids were right-handed, but they could make a guess. They could infer that, or they could, as we say in math, draw a conclusion. All right, even though it may or may not be correct. Okay, they could draw a conclusion that most kids are right-handed. Okay, now we know that's maybe not always the case, that sort of data would be accurate, but again, this is just kids' introduction to that. So we want them to be able to use this kind of data to make predictions. Okay, so I think that in my next year's class, there are going to be 20 kids who are right-handed and 3 kids who will be left-handed. I think most kids in next year's class will be right-handed. Okay, that's making a prediction. I predict that based on the results of this data, it's very likely that only a few kids in my class will be left-handed. So using the language of probability, looking at a set of data and making some predictions on it. And then, again, using those basic probability terms. So I think it's very likely that in my next year's class, most kids will be right-handed. I think it's very likely that if I went to another school and surveyed another class of kids, that most children would be right-handed. I think it's less likely that most children would be left-handed. I think it's very unlikely that most children would be left-handed. So the language can get a little bit confusing, and that's why throughout these videos I've asked you to work on the language pieces, on the vocabulary pieces, because it's really important to understand what the words actually mean in a mathematical context, but also how it relates to other concepts that the kids know. Okay, and that's why I mentioned the inferring in reading. It's like making a guess, drawing a conclusion, and then after you draw a conclusion, you can make a prediction. So these are skills that kids are familiar with in their reading, and we also want to bridge these skills over into their mathematics understanding. So this is, and as far as how you can help with this at home, please continue to use this language. Please continue to have them look at information and draw conclusions from it, make predictions about what's going to happen next based on what they have seen so far, based on what they know. And that works not just in math, but in reading and other subjects too. So this is lesson 11.5, using data to predict outcomes, the parent help video for grade 3 everyday math.